Okay, you're listening to the award-winning Philadelphia Hall Monitor here on WPPM 106.5 in Philadelphia, on Comcast Channel 66, and streaming live at phillycam.org. You can find us on Twitter at Hall Monitor WPPM, on our website www.hallmonitor.org, or on Facebook at PHM Tonight on the program, we'll be joined by Councilmember Ketsi Lozada to discuss recent developments in Kensington. Dr. Arnold Akolin will join us to tell us more about his research on the proposed 76ers arena. And our own Lance Haver will provide an update on SEPTA. Denise, how are you tonight?
I'm good. How are you?
You're not going to believe this, but Dr. Akolin spoke to us from France. He was in France as we did the interview.
Yeah, that was kind of cool. I mean, it's a good thing that Zoom doesn't have long distance charges.
We would have been in trouble.
Yeah, that could have gotten ugly.
But before we get to the good doctor and explaining his research, we're going to do an interview with Councilmember Ketsi Lozada. So here is the council member. All right, Councilmember Ketsi Lozada, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me this morning.
Okay, so the first big question, can you walk us through the creation of the Kensington Caucus?
Sure. I think that it's very simple. It's not very detailed. Four of us got together and understood that the work that each of us did will ultimately impact the other's district. And so it was important for us to come together, recognize that we needed to be more strategic and more intentional as it relates to the work that we're doing, whether it be legislation or community conversations. And when I talk about community conversations, I'm talking about residents, businesses, and stakeholders, and how we listened and acted upon the concerns and the challenges that those communities were bringing to our attention. Oftentimes, I could say and want to do something to be able to be supportive to my constituency. Councilmember Squilla and Councilmember Driscoll, of course, were in the same situation. And as everyone knows, Councilmember Harity lives in that community about 2 blocks from the Kensington Avenue, Kensington and Allegheny corner. And so it was important for us to really bring the group together to be able to figure out how we worked together to better improve the quality of life of the residents that we each serve.
And of course, this has not been without criticism, because any change is going to bring criticism. So much has been made of the Savage Sisters organization losing their lease and Prevention Point coming under the microscope. Proponents of harm reduction have been critical of these decisions. So what is the plan for harm reduction in Kensington if these organizations are no longer there?
I think it's disingenuous to say that it's just those 2 organizations that have come under a microscope. I think people need to understand that part of the work that we're doing is reviewing and analyzing and asking questions about everyone that is doing work in the Kensington community, right? It is no secret. There are billions of dollars that are getting funneled into that community, poured into that community through grants, through programs, through contracts, right? And for the last 8 to 10 years, we've been talking about 700 to 1,000 people that live unsheltered in that community. And so if there are billions of dollars that are being poured into that community through different providers, why are we still talking about the same amount of people? What is the impact? Where is the oversight? Who's doing the work? What is the commitment? And who are they actually serving? And so I think that I want to clarify that, right? That is just not 2 organizations that are being reviewed, and we're looking at everyone, and we're looking to hold everyone accountable. We are starting with ourselves. We recognize that the situation in Kensington is what it is today because government has allowed it to be that way. Right. We also recognize that the containment strategy has not worked for the last 8 to 10 years. We recognize that allowing for open air narcotic sales to happen in that concentrated area has not worked. We recognize that open air narcotics use has not worked. Because we've allowed all of that, sex work and sex trafficking numbers have also increased, right? And at the same time, because we've allowed all of that, we have also contributed to government inflicted trauma to the people who call Kensington home. And so I want people to understand, and I want to be very clear, that it is just not two organizations. We all have to assume responsibility for what is happening in that footprint. And that is what we're doing, right? Everyone is being analyzed, right? Every program is being looked at. Every provider, every stakeholder is being looked at. We are talking to businesses and trying to figure out, are they in compliance, and what type of business are they conducting along that commercial corridor, to see if they are also in compliance with what our policies and our permits and our licensing, all of that calls for. As it relates to the Savage Sisters, as elected officials, we are responsible for addressing concerns that come to us from community residents. I've been here now for a year and a half. And consistently, I get complaints from businesses, from teachers, from students, from stakeholders, from our public safety officials, that this particular organization was becoming a nuisance on the Kensington corridor, right, at that location. We have tried to connect with the Savage Sisters. I was able to meet with Sarah. I brought to her attention the concerns that we were made aware of consistently, right? This is now a year and a half of very consistent issues, issues of allowing people to congregate in front of their business, issues of not allowing for the commercial corridor cleaning to happen, issues with allowing people to use and obstruct the walkway to happen, issues with, her and her staff being disrespectful or aggressive with community residents and others. All of those things were things that we have been hearing consistently from multiple people. We spoke to her, we brought it to her attention, and we asked her to make adjustments, to take corrective action. Because as legislators, that is what we do when a business or a resident or anyone reaches out to us about an issue at a particular establishment. That's what we do, right? And when we saw that there was no steps being made for corrective action, we went to the landlord and said, we want to notify you that this is an issue. These are the consistent complaints that have been coming into our office. They've been made to public safety officials. They've been made to the school. It's been brought to the school's attention. And we need you to get your tenant to take corrective action. And he said to us, this is not the first that I've heard of these issues. These issues have also been brought to my attention consistently. I need to go back to my board, and we will make a decision on how we will move forward and how we will address this matter. After that, then I heard that their lease was not going to be renewed. And I want to be very clear. It is a decision that I don't have a problem with, right? If that is what the board decided they needed to do in order to resolve the issues that they have as stakeholders in that community, then I want to be supportive of that as well. And so I think that there is a false narrative that the councilwoman is removing harm reduction groups from the commercial corridor or from Kensington. The fact that Prevention Point was brought into the conversation, and I have said it many times, I said it along the campaign trail, that they would also be looked at as well. Why? Because we have received even more serious complaints about what is happening at Prevention Point, right? I think we should also note that Prevention Point from the very start was brought into a space that was a church. It was not an appropriate space for a needle exchange. They were also set up to serve a few hundred people, right? And distribute a few hundred syringes. They are in the thousands, right? They distributed 10 million syringes in 2022 and 7 million in 2023. We can't ask ourselves why Kensington looks the way that it does if those are the numbers that are being of syringes that are being distributed in one particular neighborhood. Not to mention that there are others who come into the footprint who also do the same type of distribution. And so I think, there's people need to understand that I am very clear, and the caucus is very clear, that harm reduction services are important, and that we need to continue to provide services to those who are suffering from addiction. We recognize that. But we are also very clear that people will not continue to live on our streets. It is inhumane for us to continue to allow that. People are living in pain, not just as a result of addiction. We showed you all photos on that legislative floor, in that chamber, of what our children see every day from those who are suffering from addiction. It is painful to see. We can't talk about recovery and prevention programs when someone is so focused on the pain that they're experiencing physically as a result of their wounds. So we need to figure out how do we bring them into our systems? And it is not going to be easy. And the optics are not going to be easy to watch. And they are going to be painful, but they are absolutely necessary, because that constituency also deserves for government to represent them and get them to a place where they are stabilized enough to be able to make a decision about what comes next for them. They cannot continue to live on our streets. I find it very offensive that people feel like it is important to call us about animals who are left out in the elements, and people have a problem with us wanting to bring people in out of the elements as human beings. That is someone's family member, that is someone's loved one, and we have a responsibility to respond to their need. Both constituencies are equally as important.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, you have to respond to your constituents. But with something like Prevention Point, right? If it exceeded its mandate by a significant order of magnitude, right? But if it's not there in any capacity, then what happens? What takes its place? Because the concern then becomes HIV goes up. Other types of diseases become more prevalent. So does the money get reallocated to other programs that will do similar things? Or is it a shift in strategy that maybe...
I think there are people that are doing that work in addition to Prevention Point. There are people that do the same work that Prevention Point does. And I'm not saying that Prevention Point is not going to be in the footprint or is not going to be able to work. They cannot be in that space. We have set them up to fail from day one by allowing them to go into a space that was inappropriate for them to be in to begin with. We have also allowed them to fail because we've allowed them to go beyond their capacity or their ability of work. Maybe we move them to a different location, right? Maybe we move them into a space where it is more appropriate for them to respond to not just an exchange, but to a medical space where you came in to get your syringes or to trade in your syringes. Let us take the opportunity where we're responding to your wounds as well, right? Let us do some type of an assessment of your well-being, of your physical well-being. Those are all parts of the conversations that we're having. These are all part of the recommendations that we're making as a caucus to the administration, who ultimately are the folks who need to make the decisions, right? We, as a caucus, as council members, we're not going to be able to address this on our own. We have seen how the entire community has been impacted when we don't work together. And so the goal here is to work as electeds, as council member electeds, in partnership with the administration, because we recognize that we're going to need each other in order for it to be able to work. And I think that an important piece that has been missing for a really long time is that we didn't allow a community voice at the table for a long time, right? Right now, for this caucus, the community is the priority. that voice, the people who live there, the people who call Kensington home, are the people who are leading the conversations about what they want to see in their community.
So budget is coming up in a couple weeks. The mayor's budget address will be in city council. Can you give us maybe a little bit of a preview of what you're asking for Kensington? And I don't know if you can give dollar amounts. Maybe that's not important, but just what you're looking for to come out of that budget.
I think out of the budget, anything that is going to help us support quality of life, improving quality of life. We've already started to address street lighting. We've already started to address the trash in that community. We've already started to address, looking at the 4 schools that are within that footprint and the resources that they're receiving and the supports that they're receiving. My schools are amongst the lowest performing schools. There is a reason that is directly tied to that as it relates to the opioid crisis, right? Teachers are afraid to come to work, right? They don't receive the necessary resources that they need to be able to provide our children with a quality education. And I have to say, right, we have principals that could be anywhere in the city. They could go elsewhere and make a lot more money. And so I have to give them kudos. I have to tell them that they're appreciated. I have to show them that they're appreciated. So we're also working with them to figure out what are their needs, right? How can we, through the budget process, support them and their needs to be able to provide our kids with a quality education within a walking distance from what is happening in Ground Zero. We are working with looking at what are those billions of dollars that are going into that community? What are those programs that are there? How do they connect people to real opportunities of recovery and prevention? And who are those folks that are really not doing the work and have taken advantage of the fact that there is no oversight? And how do we redirect those dollars? Those are all of the things that we're going to be doing and we're going to be looking at in this next budget process.
All right. I'd like to bring in Denise Clay Murray here on Philadelphia Hall Monitor.
Thank you. Hi, council member. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, I guess my main question, and it's actually a 2-part question. The argument you make about wanting people off of the street in Kensington, it's logical and it's right and it makes sense. But one of the concerns that other people in other communities might have is that when drug abuse moves from one place, it goes to another, because that's one of the arguments that folks have been making about how Kensington got to where it is. Have you talked with your fellow council members in other districts that are not part of the Kensington caucus about how you prevent that? And if so, what are you hoping for in the budget to make it so that the Kensington problem doesn't just move to another space for another council person to have to deal with?
I think the goal has never been to move people into a different neighborhood. The goal for us as a caucus, which is why it was so important for us to come together, is to prevent that from happening, right? To ensure that we are addressing the problem and we're not just shifting the problem, which is what was happening for a really long time. And I want to be very clear with you. The Kensington situation didn't get that way because it moved from one neighborhood to another. It has always been in the 7th Council District. It was underground. It was in the 7th Council District, and the past administration decided that they were going to hold a stakeholder accountable for people living underground without a plan. And so they brought the situation up to the surface. And it just stayed there. It stayed there because we also allowed for open air narcotics, and everyone decided that they were going to look the other way. That's the reality. This is not coming from anywhere else. Am I trying to say that the opioid crisis is not a citywide issue? No, that is not what I'm trying to say, because I've realized that there are people who are living in addiction in other neighborhoods. But where it has always been ground zero, it has always been in the 7th and it's always been in Kensington. The fact that we've allowed it as a government to remain there is why folks continue to come there. And it's not just from the city and other districts, it's from around the world. We are working to prevent that from happening. we are, like I said, assuming responsibility and addressing the issue. Council members have always, as the community, has always had the opportunity and the ability to reach out to us and have conversations about their concerns and their constituencies. My door remains open. My cell phone is always available. I'm happy to come to people where they are to discuss their concerns. I did reach out to Council Member Young this weekend to say to him, I think that there's a false narrative out here and I need to bring you up to speed so that if your constituents are calling you regarding what the concerns are, that you're prepared to respond. But my door is open. My door is open. And, you know, for a long time, my predecessor and Councilmember Squilla stood by themselves fighting this fight. And no one decided that they wanted to have a conversation with them because it wasn't in their backyard. We will no longer have that. People want to have a conversation. I'm in 484. My phone number is 215-686-3448. Please call us. My staff is ready to respond.
Okay. Now, we interviewed Councilmember Squilla a couple of weeks ago on the show to talk a little bit about the Kensington caucus and specifically the issue of rehabilitation. Council passed a bill in the last session of council that made it so you couldn't have safe injection sites anywhere but in the 3rd district. And the question that I've had since that passage is, okay, you have this problem in Kensington where it's obvious that you have people who are in addiction and really need to get help, but the city does not have enough drug rehab services to get that done. So has there been any discussion about maybe increasing the number of drug rehab services for people who are in addiction that want to get clean? And also, I know addicts. I have addicts in my family. And I know that we could not get them clean until they hit bottom or until they wanted to get clean. So how do you handle that without forcing people into a rehab situation where when they come out, the first thing they're going to want to do is go back to using?
First, let's address the word addicts, right? It is someone's loved one, and so we don't use that term. And I say that very respectfully because I've used it before too, and I want to make sure that we're not offending anyone. There are people who are suffering from addiction. There are those we should use the word unsheltered, whatever works. But I just want to bring that to your attention because I don't want anybody to reach out to me later on to say, you know better and you didn't clarify that. So I just want to put that out there. Second, as it relates to the amount of money and the amount of programs around recovery and prevention programs, that is precisely what we're doing. You know, we can't say that there's not enough because we don't know. There's never been oversight or an assessment of who is out there and how much are they really receiving and what are the services that they're giving. When we started to talk about safe injection sites, we stopped talking completely about recovery and prevention. That was part of the problem, right? And all of the groups that are out there, when you talk to them about their services, they will tell you that just like your family, recovery and prevention was not part of the conversation because we needed to allow them to be ready. Well, when is ready and where do they go until they are ready? They can no longer live on the streets of Kensington. They can no longer live unsheltered. It is not safe and it is not healthy for them or for the community. So we have started to talk about where are those prevention and recovery programs? Where are these beds, right? What is the description of the bed, right? If someone comes up to us today to say, I'm ready right now, you know, as having people in your family that are suffering from addiction, you know that when they say they're ready, we have a 4-hour window. We don't do a good job at identifying where are those beds. And listen, if there's a bed and it's a treatment bed versus a homeless bed or a transitional housing bed, what does it matter? The person has told you that they're ready. Get them into the bed, get them stabilized, and then let's transition them to a more appropriate bed, right? We're so focused on sometimes the small things in processes that we in this process, we're going to have to think outside the box. All of those little things, all of those little rules that are put in place that sometimes become barriers, we are going to have to readdress and reassess. And we're going to have to be flexible enough to be able to respond to that. So currently, as I mentioned, we are trying to figure out where the beds are, who the providers are that are offering prevention and recovery programs. Where are they? Not just in Philadelphia County, but across the Commonwealth. How do we connect people back to where they originated from, right? How do we stabilize them to a point where we can connect them back to their places of origin, so that it doesn't further deplete the resources that we have here for real Philadelphians who are suffering in addiction? All of those are conversations that we are having, and that will be a part of the next budget process.
Okay, thank you so much for giving us some of your time. And you actually answered one of the questions I was going to ask you about, of the fact that not everybody who is, dealing with addiction in Kensington is from Philadelphia. In a past life, I worked in Bucks County, and we used to get calls on the police desk a lot about people having to go and get their cars because their kid took the car to an open air drug market and the police came and got them. So,
Right.
I wanted to thank you for answering that question before I even had to ask it. But I'm going to give you back to Larry McGlynn, our co-host here on Philadelphia Hall Monitor, which is what you're listening to on WPPM 106.5.
All right. Thank you, Denise. And Councilmember Lozada, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you again for having me. As I said, I'm always available and accessible. Please feel free to reach out if there's ever concerns, if there's questions. We are trying to be, as a caucus, as transparent as possible. Again, we understand and we recognize that the optics of the work that we are going to be doing is not going to be easy, but we want our constituents to understand that we recognize that both of these populations are equally as important and deserve the attention that we are really trying to give them. And so, I'm excited about the residents of Kensington being excited that their legislators are really hearing them and making them a priority.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. We would like to thank Councilmember Ketsi Lozada for joining us here on the program. And next, we are going to hear from Dr. Arnold Akolin, who is a professor of real estate, Denise. I didn't know that people...
I didn't know that real estate had professorships connected to it. That's new.
I didn't know that either, but we're glad that there is, because he provided some context and some information regarding the very controversial proposal to build a new 76ers arena in Chinatown. So here is our interview with the doctor explaining what some of the pitfalls may be of this plan. All right. Well, Dr. Akolin, thank you so much for joining us.
Happy to be here.
So before we get into the study and the arena, can you give us a little bit of your background?
Sure. Yes. So I'm currently an associate professor in real estate in the College of Built Environment at the University of Washington in Seattle. And I came from France to do my undergrad at the University of Pennsylvania in the 2000s. And afterward, I spent much of the 2010s in Philadelphia. And so that's my connection to Philadelphia. But my research is really on community and economic development, both housing as well as investment and crime and changes in ethnic enclave like Chinatown.
So I just as a note here, I have 7 years of French in high school and college. I can't speak a word of it, so I apologize. But so when we talk about this arena, the proposed arena here in Philadelphia, what does the potential economic impact look like for Philadelphia?
Yeah, and so Philadelphia, right, as a city, has had a lot of up and down, and in the last 20 years there have been more ups and downs, and that's really fortunate now. And there are a number of areas that has seen growth, whether it's Center City, whether it's West Philly, whether it's the Navy Yard and Stadium District. And so there are all of those really great core neighborhoods, economic engines of the city that are really important. And the proposed site for the arena is in one of those really core location that has been struggling. The redevelopment of the gallery into the fashion district has not been as successful as was hoped by any means, and it's now only a couple years after having been redeveloped in need of a new stage. And so the proposed arena is coming at a time when that site and that location is looking for what is the highest and best use for the next 30 years. And the arena itself would create some job, would create some economic activity. There is no doubt about it. But the question is whether it also has the potential to displace some existing economic activity by both creating businesses that will compete with existing businesses like entertainment, food, and other kind of retail that would be offered as part of the arena development will take away from some of the existing businesses. And in addition, the kind of traffic pattern associated with the event that would be hosted at the arena, both the games and the additional events, will potentially lead some of the customers of existing businesses to just avoid that area on those days, right? And so you can have both a substitution effect with a new retail taking away from existing one, as well as just customers not staying away from the 5-6 blocks around the arena at the time of the games and at the time of the event to avoid traffic, right? And so both of those effects could potentially be negative on existing businesses. And one of the things that we have seen with the pandemic is how thin the margin on which some of those businesses operate, and how when you have a decline of 10, 15, 20% in foot traffic and in retail, in customers, you can have businesses that are just not able to stay in business and close. And so some relatively small differences in one day or 2 days a week losing 20-25% customers could make the difference between a restaurant staying in business or closing. So those are some of the concerns that I try to raise in the study, not saying that any of the numbers there are hard numbers that would happen for sure if the arena was built, but just trying to think through, even with relatively small negative impact on existing businesses, what would that mean in terms of employment, in terms of taxes for the community and the city, right?
So the study came out last week, and since then, people on both sides of this argument here, and in this city, this has been a hot argument for quite a while now. The people who are not in favor of the arena look at this and say, here's another piece of evidence that says what we've been saying all along. Those who support the arena have been very vocal about saying, well, we're not so sure about this. We don't know about this study. Can you tell us a little bit about the methodology behind the study and how you come to those conclusions?
Yeah, and so the main thing is that so far the 76th place side has really not released a lot of detail about any of the numbers they have put out, right? Whether it's the job, whether it's the tax impact, there are those really big high level numbers, but then the study that must exist behind it have really not been made public. And so we don't know what the assumptions are. We don't know where the data are coming from. We don't know really much about how those numbers came to be. For this study, I don't have access to any private or proprietary information. It's really relying on publicly available data to a large extent, on number of jobs, number of the payroll numbers, the tax that has been generated at the zip code level for those businesses, and just very simply saying, like, based on existing studies that have shown some negative impact from new development, whether it's new arenas, convention centers, or retail centers, or other new big business coming in and taking away activity from existing businesses, we have seen anywhere in the order of 0 to 25% decrease in jobs, in businesses, or in sales. So if we have some number in that range, whether it's 3, 4, 5, 10%, decrease, what does that look like in terms of employment, in terms of taxes? And so that's really all that study is doing, is trying to provide some numbers on what is currently there, and so bringing to fore the fact that it's in one of the densest neighborhood in the city in terms of number of businesses, number of employment, and so there's already a lot there. And so anything that affect positively or negatively those existing businesses will have a big impact on jobs and on taxes. And then if there were to be some negative impact from a new development, what could it mean for the city?
Now, have you studied this type of impact in other cities when arenas have been built?
No, that's really not my research area. I do teach economic analysis, and so we do a lot of going through, for example, if you have a new Walmart or a new Costco, how do you think through what does it mean for the existing one, like kind of that site analysis for suitability analysis as kind of calculation, but that's not my research.
Oh, okay. All right. I'd like to bring you Denise Clay Murray here on Philadelphia Hall Monitor.
Hi.
Hi, Professor. How are you?
Very good.
And
Nice
thank
being
you
here.
for joining us from Washington State, which
I'm
I'm sure it's a lot earlier there than it is here.
I'm actually in France right now, so
Oh, you're
it's
in-
a lot later.
Wow. Okay, now I really feel bad. I guess my first question for you is, has the city seen this data? Because in the end, it's going to be city council and the mayor's office that actually makes this decision.
Yeah, so I don't know. Sorry, I don't have the answer to that question. Like the study itself, everything that is in it is public and is from public sources. So they can, yeah, that's available. But I haven't spoken to anybody from the city.
Okay. What made this project, I guess, you said that this is not your research area, stadiums and stuff like that. So what about this compelled you to want to look into it?
Yeah. So I have been in Philadelphia. Philadelphia was my first home in the US about 15 years ago, and I have stayed in touch with one of my faculty at Penn, who has been doing a lot of work on historic Chinatowns and their evolution over time. And as part of that project, we had been doing surveys of businesses and residents in Chinatown in Boston, New York, Philadelphia, both in the 2010 and then more recently during the pandemic. And so we have been kind of following some of the evolution that those neighborhoods have been going through. And as part of the proposal for the arena, there was a lot of opposition and concern about the potential impact it would have on the surrounding area. And as you probably know, like the convention had a lot of promises that were not held. There is a fear that the arena similarly would have a lot of promises that are not held, and then essentially blank wall, limited economic activity being injected in an area that is sorely needing more foot traffic, more people, more opportunities to add to what is already happening south of Market and north of the site proposal for the arena.
Now, when you say this is an area that needs more foot traffic, we have a mall that they're talking about taking part of the mall away, particularly the part with the movie theater and an arcade that young people go to on Saturday nights to stay out of the street. Do you think that this has been like thought? Because if you've got businesses that are already successful, why take them away even for a few months?
Yeah, that's right. Like the construction period would be pretty long. I mean, like we started the conversation earlier with the fact that that site of the gallery, now the fashion district, has gone through some iteration, and it's a really important location for many communities throughout Philadelphia that have really good access to transit and can come here and take advantage of cosmopolitan canopy, for using Elia Anderson's word, right, of like really bringing people from throughout the region in that location. Unfortunately, the financial have not really panned out, right? The the fashion district is struggling, and like it cannot really continue in its current state. It seems like they are going through bankruptcy proceeding, and there will need to be something to be reinjected in terms of private and potentially public capital to bring that area up for the next 20, 30 years. But to your point, yeah, I think that a visioning effort with all of the people who use those locations, those businesses, and understanding what's working, what's not working, and how can it be made better would be valuable, right? The Center City District has come out with a study of what they were thinking could happen for its market, and there was a visioning workshop that was organized by some of the community group and Penn faculty, and I think that those are really great efforts. But ultimately, as you mentioned, it's a city that need to come in and have a full 360 of what has failed in the past redevelopment effort and what is needed to hopefully bring that location to a better place, and that hasn't happened so far, and it's not clear that jumping into the arena that will lock in that particular portion of the site for the next 30 years would answer the factor that have previously not worked out. And so once the arena is built, it will be there for a long time. And I mean, whether it's successful or not, you don't really walk away from a 1.5 billion project that easily, or maybe it's not more than that even.
Now, one of the arguments that we're seeing in terms of the stadium is, on the one hand, you have Chinatown that has seen what's happened in other Chinatowns where stadiums have been built, most notably Washington, D.C. And, they've seen that now that basically Chinatown is just a stop on the metro, folks have decided they want to pull out and move to Virginia and basically leave that white elephant there. But on the other hand, you have organized labor that's saying, we need construction work for our workers so that they can, continue to feed their families. I guess, how do you balance those two competing interests, or is it like too early in the process to figure that out?
No, I mean, I think that those are a great question. Like the experience of historic Chinatown with really taking the brunt of some of those large projects, and the Washington example are really important to keep in the background. And the fact that Philadelphia needs more investment, needs more job is, I mean, undeniable. But so to start with the job piece, right? Like the Bellwether district, the Navy Yard, and Stadium district could be an area where you see more development, you see expansion, you see really big project taking place. And so like it's not if it doesn't get built there won't be similar arena stadium project that couldn't employ also substantial number of workers. And so the Wells Fargo arena is currently going pretty substantial reinvestment, and they have potential for having more investment in that location, seeing more of the kind of mix of entertainment and retail that the 76ers say they want to build in the proper site for the arena actually take place in the stadium district and be positive for that area and create a lot of jobs, right? And then on the other hand, for that particular site, if additional uses are identified, whether, as you mentioned, it's more entertainment, we're investing into some of the theaters or other use, whether it's medical or apartments or whatever the use are, there would be jobs created for the site, right? Like, I don't think that anybody is saying there shouldn't be anything happening on that site, and it shouldn't be redeveloped if the current use are not working. But I think whether it happen in the next 6 months or the next year, like it can take some time to get to the point where the use is identified, the capital come in, but then hopefully you would see the job being created for construction on that site. at some relatively near future in the next 2 to 3 to 5 years. And then for Chinatown, like and the rest of the community, making sure that whatever is built there is not taking away from their current customers and taking away from what is working there, but instead add more activity, add more opportunities, and is additive to what is already there.
Well, thank you so much for sharing some of your time with us. I'm going to give you back to our co-host, Larry McGlynn, and you're listening to Hall Monitor on WPPM 106.5.
All right. Thank you very much, Denise. And Doctor, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
And we maybe somewhere down the road, we'll check back in with you if we see some new developments, and we really appreciate you.
Okay. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you for having me. Bye.
All right. We would like to thank Dr. Aklon for joining us on the program. And now we'd like to bring in Hall Monitor co-host and consumer reporter Lance Haver.
Good evening. Thank you very much for having that interview. It was really interesting. And I thought the point that he made hadn't been made elsewhere, which is just because they don't build it there doesn't mean they're not going to build it someplace else. So those construction jobs may not be lost. And today's Inquirer talks about what a substantial investments being discussed at the sports area. So we'll see. Mm-hmm. But I'm reporting on a SEPTA board meeting. This is the first time in 25 years that the chairman of the board wasn't a white male Republican insider power broker. It is African-American Democrat. And the question becomes, what will that mean for the SEPTA board? Will it really mean changes? I'd like to start out by showing this video that will kind of show maybe not so much is changing. If we could get it up and running, this is with
Mr. Carrington, who was at the SEPTA board meeting this afternoon. And Mr. Carrington brought up an interesting point, I thought. And so in his own words, here's what Mr. Carrington told the SEPTA board this afternoon.
My question for the SEPTA is, why can they not have information phone service 24 hours a day instead of having it end at 7 p.m., especially for people who are out late at night and all of a sudden their bus is not coming and the only way to find out is online, which sometimes is not reliable because the bus might show up and it's not actually there. Why can't we have a 24-hour information service?
So when you've been waiting for a bus late at night and you call SEPTA, no one answers the phone?
Oh, well, you don't call SEPTA late at night because all you're going to get after 7 p.m. is a recording. And as far back as I can remember, it's been that way.
Were you satisfied with what the SEPTA board told you about that today?
Well, in actuality, the SEPTA board said, well, actually it was some of the departments, like communications, operations, something. They said that they are working on getting earlier notification for missing buses.
Is there anything else you wanted to add?
Oh, well, I'm pretty sure that this affects more than the few people that I have talked to. And
it affects everybody who's waiting for a bus.
People need to speak up about things, okay? Talk to your council people. Talk to SEPTA. Come to a meeting.
Okay, we were all muted here. Okay.
So the significance of Mr. Carrington's interview is put in perspective by what I'm reporting on next. The SEPTA board, of course, asked one of their staff people to speak with him, and not a single member of the SEPTA board asked him any questions. But we all know, including the SEPTA board, that there's a shortage of bus operators, and as a result, rides are canceled on a regular basis, and SEPTA has responded to that by making it even harder for people to figure out what happened to their bus. So what is SEPTA spending money on? Well, it didn't come out at the board meeting. It did come out in an article in the Philadelphia Inquirer. SEPTA has decided, and if we can pull up that slideshow, please. SEPTA has decided, instead of spending money to have someone answer the phone and tell riders what's happening to their bus and how long they're going to have to wait, they decided to hire an election-denying lawyer to file a lawsuit to try and disenfranchise Philadelphia voters. Now, the issue here is, whether you like it or not, we elected Larry Krasner as the district attorney. It's absolutely true. Some people don't like him. But it's also undeniably true that Mr. Krasner won an overwhelming victory. It was not close. There was no opportunity to say, well, a few votes didn't get counted and it would have had a different outcome. Mr. Krasner's been elected once and been elected twice by overwhelming majorities. The Republicans in Harrisburg don't like Mr. Krasner, and so they tried to impeach him. When it turned out the court said you can't impeach an elected official because you don't like him, they came up with something else. And what that something else was taking power away from him. So taking power away from the Philadelphia voters. And SEPTA has decided to intervene in the case. And what SEPTA is filed as a motion to intervene. And the reason why they're doing it is because they don't even want the court to hear the case. And I've taken an excerpt from their filing. And what it says is they want the case dismissed before the judge even hears it. Now, in this case, what's going on, of course, is somebody's paying this lawyer. And who is this lawyer and how did he get hired? Well, the lawyer who's being paid an undisclosed amount. Now, maybe in executive session, maybe someplace else, there was some discussion about his fees. We wrote to the SEPTA public relations people and we asked those questions. We have not gotten an answer yet, and I will be at the next SEPTA board meeting to once again ask the question, how is Mr. Haverstick selected and how much are we paying him? What's the upper limit? How many more bus drivers could we hire? How many people could we get to answer the phone? How many more buses could we clean or stations could we clean? Unfortunately, it appears that on a regular basis, we hear these horror stories about SEPTA. And so instead of addressing that, apparently the SEPTA board, now it may have been while Mr. Dion was still there, we don't know yet, but the SEPTA board is hiring Mr. Haverstick. And you can see there's no question about who they've hired. Here he is, names right there, lead counsel to disenfranchise Philadelphia voters. Now, it shouldn't be a surprise that Mr. Haverstick is trying to disenfranchise Philadelphia voters. This comes from his actual webpage. He brags about this. He puts down in writing as a reason to hire him, quote, he is referred to in media reports as counsel of choice for state Republicans in a number of recent policy fights for his work on matters that garner national press attention. And what matters would those be? What is Mr. Haverstick well known for? Mr. Haverstick is well known for supporting election deniers. Mr. Haverstick represented the Republican caucus in its attempt to get the 2020 vote thrown out in Pennsylvania and have Mr. Trump appointed as the president, even though he lost. And again, it's not an argument I'm making. This is not an exaggeration. Here it is. Here's the conclusion, and you can see his name. This comes from the lawsuit the Republican caucus filed. Conclusion: to fully protect the system of voting in Pennsylvania, which is constitutionally protected by our promise of secrecy, the caucus respectfully requests the court grant plaintiffs, Mr. Trump, requests for injunctive relief. Throw out the election, make Mr. Trump the president. Now, again, Mr. Haverstick doesn't hide who he is or what he represents. He has literally given tens of thousands of dollars to the Republican Party. And this is a copy of Open Secret's webpage. Open Secrets is an organization that publishes a webpage that lists all the campaign donations that are made that have to be legally reported. So as you look down the list, Republican, thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars, whether it was Mehmet Oz or it was another Republican. There's not a single Democrat on the list, not a single independent on the list, not a single Green Party or Working Families Party. Mr. Haverstick represents, according to his webpage, very important Republicans and gives to very important Republicans. Now, we don't know the full amount that he gives because many of us know that there's an even easier way for people like Mr. Haverstick to hide their support for campaigns. This is just a brief thing that shows donors can give to what's called a 501c4, which is a nonprofit organization, not a 501c3, which is a nonprofit organization that doesn't get involved in politics. 501c4, they give to what's called a super PAC, and the super PAC puts the ads. We don't have any way of knowing if Mr. Haverstick supported any of those ads. And now we can just pull this down and finish the conversation. So here's what SEPTA is doing with my money. Let everyone else talk about their money. My money is being used to support a political operative, an election denier, and somebody who has acted against my interest, and I resent it. I don't believe that SEPTA should be able to use public dollars to support the Republican Party. In many ways, this is just indicative of their belief that the only way that they can get money out of Harrisburg is to make a large contribution to the Republican Party machine, like they did with Mr. Dion, and hope for the best.
Well, if
And-
it's any consolation, Lance, considering this guy was a lawyer for the Trump campaign and they lost every single lawsuit they filed regarding the election except for one, I don't know if this is necessarily going to have the desired effect.
Well, as I was raised with, from your lips to God's ears, but it's our money, and they don't disclose how much they're paying him. They don't disclose if there's an upper limit, and they don't disclose where the money's coming from. So we know SEPTA pleads poverty. We know they say they don't have enough money. I do know that they have a very large fund that they call the Fair Stabilization Fund with $500 million in it. Maybe they're using that. But the main thing is they're relying upon the same thing that always got them into trouble, playing an insider's game. Instead of building a coalition of other public transit companies from across the state. So Wilkes-Barre has a public transit, Scranton, Harrisburg, York, Pittsburgh, Dauphin County. There are any number, Altoona, there are any number of public transit systems. I forgot the Lehigh Valley, by the way, but there are any number of public transit systems. They could bring all of them together. They could bring the unions together, the environmentalists together, the businesses that have to rely on SEPTA to get people to shop or to get people to work. There is this very large demand for public transit. And rather than mobilizing that, what they're doing is giving tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars to an election denying Republican Party operative who brags about it. And nobody on the SEPTA board, which is now controlled by Democrats, nobody on the SEPTA board even asked. And that is really disillusioning.
I mean, it's amazing hubris to hire this guy for this specific task, to hire him in general. But it's every time we talk about this, something new comes up that's just, disheartening is one word for it. But this is amazing in the worst possible way.
It seems like there's no shame of being a lawyer who represents bad people and bad things and does bad things. This person's being rewarded with what appears to be a no-bid contract, despite the fact that he tried to throw out the votes of all of Pennsylvania and is now trying to deny Philadelphia voters their choice of district attorney. I will go to the board and ask those questions. The PR people, I'm not surprised, but I'm disappointed, didn't bother to answer me when I asked those questions. Who hired him? How much is he getting paid? And is there an upper limit?
All right. Well, Lance, thank you so much for that. We'd like to thank Councilmember Ketsi Wazada and Dr. Arnold Accolone for being with us on the program tonight. Next week, Councilmember Jim Harity will be with us. So we'll see you next week on Hall Monitor.